was trying to sketch out what was being described as from one person that saw these things in a hangar. Okay. So that's it. So in summary, we have worked out that there were the original proposal that was derived. So this is O'Day, 48 and Cone. This was the original cone that I derived from experiment and my estimation on where the disruption zone was. I just chose a point relative to the data I had within the Sothic Triangle's notch. The Sothic Triangle is here, and it has this very easy to describe, to tell Masons what to do or whatever, which is 949. And essentially you need something that is 22 units long, and you have two pins that are 4 units apart. And then all you do is you just move it so that the joining of the two ends of the string is directly above the center line between these two 4 unit apart things. And it's that makes it incredibly easy for a stonemason to work out what they need to do. And the ratio from experimental determination came out at 2.286, let's say, which is 1.573 out from the ratio as described. However, I do believe that Hutchins, which is a little bit more out from this, and I basically think that this is just a draftsman's estimate, is compliant with how a sacred geometry, the golden ratio is shrinking. And so I believe that Hutchins is right here, Robert Hutchins. And Zeiss, unfortunately, sorry for his book with his 76.345, is too far out from the ratio and experimental observation. Okay, and I did the hard work to model this in 3D to assess this. This was the original here. That's the original. Okay, that is the original. I have the Robert Hutchins here, which is, you can see it's a little bit outside. And in the case of Robert Hutchins, he's going through the diameter, which you want to do if you are a spiral vortex coming in, shrinking at the golden ratio to hit exactly the diameter at one sort of unit or one golden ratio shrinking step. But I would like Robert Hutchins and Charlie Zeiss to actually hash their thoughts out on this. So Charlie Zeiss is the furthest from the kind of like Abydos type description. And so I think I'm going to go moving forward with the Robert Hutchins one here. Okay. And then we talked about the experimental evidence here of the accurate top of the caduceus circle being absolutely correct as per my interpretation, and it was always this interpretation and nothing other, from the original slide 91 in my original January 2018 presentation, which I did not know until I was assembling this variant of slide 91, which had these two better images. The original slide 91 had only this image on it. I did not realize that this was carved by Coptic Christians until a few days ago, but it makes complete sense with what we have learned since. Okay, so everything follows from that, and the experimental data here is very, very strong in my opinion for how things should be arranged. And this is the N-1 core. And from that, I believe the understanding that I'm presenting to you today is that if you have these two arranged like this, it's quite difficult. It isn't like this. Let's start that again. We do know that the spheres are hollow. So just on this basis alone, you could imagine that the ultra dense coherent matter inside the hollow part of the sphere, which is confined by the toroid around it, the toroid being this kind of toroid around it, it is not going to bleed out, but it's not going to want to interact with something right next to it. And so if you push it harder than 48, you will have distortion here. But if I go like this, maybe, I think that the distorted structure here, and this is the inside core. So I've got the outer core here. Sorry, the outer core. Yeah. Let's get this right. The outer. This is the outer when you're just taking the normal sphere and cloning it 48 times radially. The inner one looks like this, okay? And that inner one is effectively the same diameter as the squashed outer one. So I'm saying that when the squashed outer one becomes incident with the inner one, then you have an instability situation and the thing falls apart. I think the inside is much less forgiving of being squashed than the outside. That is my hypothesis for now. I would welcome anyone else's hypothesis. And so I reckon that is why you have a limit of 48 on any subtor. Okay. And that, my friends, is what I wanted to share with you today. And I will put in everything for the sake of just having everything on one page. We will put in the Robert Hutchins scale here. So we can go right the way into that and we can see all of those scaled structures. And we will put in the overall original material here. That's the experimentally determined. And then I modified it here to move up the disruption zone to the golden ratio point. And that is essentially that. So have you got any questions? If you've got any questions, I'll take them now. Hi, Phil. So Phil, if you just joined us, welcome. And what I've talked through here is that Robert Hutchins is probably correct with his determination of how the cone is shaped. It's the closest to the work that is in Abydos, the Sothic triangle. You can go and review that. And I think we have a working understanding of why we can't go beyond 48. And I think these are some of the last things to resolve in the fractal toroidal geometry. So, Bob Wildfish, are you publishing the 3D models? I'd love an STL. Okay, so the guy that helped me produce the 3D parametric builder for fractal toroidal structures as a Python script in Blender, he's primed and ready to receive my final kind of working model to produce a Blender script that allows for building the full structures with their disruption zones and their subtor structures and cones for multiple fractal subtor levels, so that you can easily create the geometry of the flower of life, of the swastika, and these kind of things, the things that I've been sharing in recent presentations. You'll be able to build them parametrically in Blender. So that's the idea. I will put out some. There has to be some way to help my wife and I pay my bills. So I will put out at some point some T-shirts with what I would say are my official understanding, until the facts change, of what I think the structure is, both as 2D graphic art and as some 3D graphic art, maybe with some interesting catchphrases. I would be interested for people to vote on particular catchphrases or suggest some. I know some people have said them in the past, but they will be available probably on one of the dropship places. But I think we're in the final stages of understanding what this is. It's nice to have had the contribution from Robert Hutchins and from Zeiss and from that's Charlie Zeiss and from Gabby Ensign recently. I think that is all informed and helped settle what is actually going on. I'm probably going to do a Vortex one on here to check and to verify. Thank you, Mark Dame. That's very, very kind of you. It really helps. Alex Lersman says, this may not be the time or place, but I believe alternative energy needs its own special crowdfunding platform, maybe including crypto. I do know that there are people thinking along those lines. So Bob Wildfish says, I'm happy to buy the Blender files once they're made. Oh, they won't be for buying, they'll be for free, right? So, but, you know, I will make a selection of things, you know, of the basic structures. And Toby Tobias, yes, it's literally in your face. Thank you very much, Verity Hound. That's very kind of you. Yes, this will help. I've actually I've got Jordan Collin over here, and he's helping work through the Matsumoto material. We found a good proportion. I mean, we literally have very, very, very large number of. I'll show you here. A very large number of packs, and these are for, and you can see the experiments that he bound up here. These are S14, S16, S21, S33. So these are the photographs, sometimes of SEM, sometimes of, you know, under the microscope. So thank you very much, Black Tie. Thank you very much, Claire Westwood. That's wow. Cheers, guys. Yeah, I will work towards animation. And in fact, my intention is the new version of the software that you see on the screen here, Lightwave. I've literally bought the last 3 versions, and I actually haven't used them because I use this thing called Lightwave CAD, which gives me all the sort of top-end tools that you get in the CAD software, which enable me to do all the extension and do this work to verify whether Zeiss or Ensign or Hutchins were correct, and really drill down on that. The new software has better fluid dynamics. It has the same fluid dynamics that I have in this software, but it also works with OTools, interestingly. What is it? Anyway, it's a software that produces very good visuals. So what I intend to do is use the best understanding I have of the subfractal tors and try and create a finite element analysis kind of semi-ish attempt based on matching what you physically see in nature. So what you physically see, for instance, in what actually goes on when you do an experiment. So if we look here and we look at this, by trying to match the flow pattern you get here in and here, this is in non-charge separated material, this is in potentially charge separated material, or at least polar. In these particular images here, you're seeing the flow pattern. So I will target a simulation that will produce something that looks like this on one TOR level, and then see if I can deliver an overall pattern of what a fractal toroidal structure is doing in fluid dynamics, probably with only 4 subtor structures. I think that's what I want to see. I want to see if by fractalizing a single fluid dynamic structure and then just a straight tor and then making it into 4 subtors, do we actually see what we actually observe when we are looking at, say, the 4 tor structures and the 3 tor structures and the 5 and the 6 tor structures that we see here? So these 3 tor structures, do we see a vortex forming? Okay, do we see a vortex forming in 3? Okay, when we go to 4, or when we go on 2, do we see these beams coming in? And do we see on a 4 order structure, do we see the beams not escaping? And so these are the questions that I would like to see if a simulation can show. Okay. Corky says AI has some catching up to do. Yeah, well, AI will probably tell me some point in the future what I've already said. and it'll be very exciting. Not really. Claire Whistle said, the plasma entities are so proud of you. Well, this is a huge team effort. This has required scientists from all over the world to allow the project to come and visit them. And the project has only been able to visit those scientists and been able to do the analysis because the crowd has supported that work through donations, big and small. And so this is a complete team effort. It's just I happen to be the one lucky enough to do a fair proportion of the work and be in a position to bring some of this data together. I do feel all the time the luckiest person on earth. I was telling someone when I was having my lunch earlier today, this is the best job in the universe. I have to do it, but I'm not sorry I am. So, and it's just great that I have the support from you guys and the support from the crowd. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But, I think we're getting less wrong as we continue to work. As the old phrase goes, the harder I work, the luckier I get. That kind of thing. Yeah, thanks, Black Tie. It really means a lot. Yeah, so Corky, you want to do the animation. As a person who ran an animation business for most of my paid career and the graphics design business, I'm itching to do the animation, but there were things that were not settled for me. And I think those things are iterating down to a solution. And, we can kind of agree that, when third parties out there are showing you things that are mathematically derived or derived from looking at sacred geometry alone, and they're getting quite close to what is observed in nature and what is written in ancient texts as the way to do this, then we're converging on a solution. And you know what? I think probably if you set up a scenario where the fluid dynamics was constrained to an environment which was 16.9, or at least roughly, with a little bit of leeway, nature would take over and fill in the gaps very, very quickly. It would just do what it needs to do very, very quickly. Thank you, Verity Hound. She says she'd like to help on some podcasts. I do need to find a way of upscaling the information as the information becomes clear and the replicability of the experiments becomes easier and easier, and more people have done it. Then it is going to need the information packaged into really, really tight and very, very accurate and well-referenced pockets of information that can be bite-sized and really easily absorbed. And so it's going to need coordination and assistance, really, because there's so much you can do, in my view, with this technology, this catalysis all the way to nucleon decay. catalysis is kind of like lowering the energy threshold for a chemical reaction to occur, but there's even weaker levels than that. The failure of an ionic bond or a metal bond, the weak metal bond between crystal grain structures. So yeah, bite-sized bagels. Yeah. Yeah, I like it, Gordon. Cool. Alex Lozman said, I paid a guy to make a dope rap about plasmoid fusion for $50 on Fiverr. Excellent. Oh, I look forward to hearing it. All right, so with that, I think probably I'm going to close out for tonight. I will share the basic geometry images and the, you know, the kind of things that you're seeing here, kind of nail down what we're talking about here. I am keen to understand if people have another view on what is going on with why it only appears to be 48. I kind of had this mental image in my mind that it was something to do with the degeneracy or the maximum level of compression of condensed matter. You know, when the Earth is collapsed into a black hole, the black hole is 12 millimeters across. It isn't 1 millimeter across, it's 12 millimeter across. I think it's something to do with a Schwinger limit. And maybe the Schwinger limit is coming into play here. I don't know, but maybe something like that. Or in this process, the fractal toroidal moment can only compress matter and keep it condensed in a, you know, quark-gluon cluster, electron nucleo macrocluster in the terms of SV Adamenko. You can only keep it there at a certain density, and when the toroidal moment structure, the fractal toroidal moment structure collapses, it just spews forth, and you know, that causes failure. And I think that's what's going on. All right, so thank you very much. Yeah, it looks like a... Terran Earthling says it looks like a form of flying saucer propulsion. Perhaps you missed the Cosmic Summit presentation and other presentations where I walked through the basis for this and the fact that you have literally a paper by NASA which is describing in 1979 all of the properties of UFOs, and saying that if we do a current loop, this is a 6 Tor n-1 Tor structure, we end up with magnetic reconnection, and the magnetic reconnection ends up with a phase singularity of a defined size, and the phase singularity is what causes the Aharonov-Bohm effect. And they're saying this is for intergalactic travel, and it is a fractal toroidal moment structure. There's no doubt about it. And this work here shows going to a phase singularity, right? This is published in mainstream journal in 2021, but it's replicating 1976 work that is quoted in this 1979 paper, okay? And maybe you missed the fact that I was showing that this is the structure that makes the ARV, in my view, work. And it works by having a counteracting flux of relic neutrinos that is able to nullify the flux that's coming from the cosmos. And it literally, when it's spun up, the structure is, the process is spun up to a specific level. It has a toroidal field in there that's able to maintain levitation indefinitely. Paul S.G. Tree says, you said the inside spheres were hollow but dense. Dense meaning what? I mean dense in terms of electronuclear macro clusters. Okay, so if we've got, if we have the front cover here of Takaaki Matsumoto's Steps to the Discovery of Electronuclear Collapse, and by the way, we're going to be able to upgrade all of these images. You have this sphere, and the sphere is hollow, and out of this hollow sphere, all of this carbon has spewed. Okay, so you've got to imagine all of that carbon is in that sphere when the electrodynamic fractal toroidal moment-bearing structure, fractal toroidal electrodynamic structure, is confining it in there with the lead on the outside. The lead is the starting material, the carbon is the synthesized material. Okay, so I believe it can only compress so much baryonic matter in there in a coherent state, and then it reaches a threshold, and then, you know, maybe this didn't reach its threshold, but regardless, when you remove the confining fractal toroidal structure, it will spew forth probably the level of resonance that's going on in there. Okay. Yeah, it's not a singularity. It's definitely not a singularity. Yeah, it will spew out, I wouldn't say molten metals. I would suggest it would be metals that are in a state of jellification or non-thermal fluidization. And it's due in part to, there's several ways you can achieve that. If you do it with the yang force and you extract energy from the hidden energy within the matter, I think the matter will become more dense in its own right. If you over-energize it by putting more energy into it, and more chi energy, it might fluidize without becoming hot. So, you know, these kind of things. Yeah, the sapphire reactor is clearly the same thing. Yeah. I have suggested, after watching the sapphire presentation, but I basically, it was a thought that I'd had for a long time. I just wanted to get it out that point, that I believe that solar systems are built with this basic technology, or rather, you can use this technology to build solar systems. Yes, it could be a tractor beam. So, you know, in the tractor beam, when you have one of these devices, you automatically get a tractor beam built in, and it will be under here in the vector of the flux of relic neutrinos. So it's very easy to understand how the tractor beam would work. So, since you asked the question, let's explain that. You are being pushed down onto the Earth by the relic neutrino flux that has to go through you to go to the condensator, which is the Earth itself. And that's why it grows, because it condenses 2.25 electron cold neutrinos into 938 or whatever it is, million electron volts, protons, neutrons, or whatever. Okay, so it's like a steam engine. The steam's converted into condensed water, and it reduces by 1,716 times. But in this case, it goes from 0.25, and so you basically, if you take 938 and divide by 0.25, you get a lot more than 1,716. So it's condensing that. It is therefore a gravitational well. The cosmic flux of relic neutrinos then goes through you and pushes you onto the ground. Now, inertia is the same thing. You have to work through that. And so if you have something that you've got enough flux of relic neutrinos to levitate your ARV here off the ground, if we're flying up in space and we modulate our beam that comes down, and you have another thing in the way of that beam, it will naturally be pulled up into the device. And so, you know, it's fairly trivial, because you're going to have it's the opposite of gravity. So the flux of relic neutrinos is pushing all of the matter in your body up, or all of the matter in your car up, or all of the matter in your 36-wheeler or whatever. You see these videos, like there's one very famous video where a tornado is traveling over a landscape, and it goes past a parking lot full of very large haulage trucks, and the trucks, the cabins are lifted up very slowly, moved a little bit, and gently laid down. And I would argue that in that case, the relic neutrino flux was sufficient to overcome the natural flux of relic neutrinos that is trying to get to the condensator, which is the the Earth itself. And so it's just the counterflux. And we know that the tornado, in my view, in my opinion, is the same kind of structure that's doing all of the work in all of these systems. So it will naturally be able to negate the mass which is holding that truck metal on the ground. It'll just be able to lift it up. Do you guide the vehicle with magnetic pulses? It's very simple. You have phasing around and you have phasing up. So it has 8 capacitor plates here, and you can oscillate the charge on those up and down on each of these capacitor arrays. And, you can see they're kind of arranged alternately. So it might actually be there's 24 alternate, and you might have one phasing up and one phasing down. And by doing that, you lock it, but you might want to phase one slightly up a little bit more than the down, and so you have a net balancing of the flux that is gravity. Okay, and then you could also phase it round, but I don't think you need to phase it round. What you can do is you can increase proportionally the speed of phasing up and slow down on the other side, and this matches precisely the control mechanism, which is a hemisphere like that, and you tilt the hemisphere here. It's here in the control mechanism, and that will just be shifting the rate of change of the phasing here, which will move the fractal toroid that is around the structure, such that you spin the ether, and then the ether persists spinning like a superfluid, and that moves the charged particles that you need to do the work. Okay, and of course in the air and in water, those are already available. And if you want to work in space, you need to work directly with the relic neutrinos, or you can push against something with the British Railways Board patent. They had the capacitor arrays underneath, and they had a nuclear reactor producing particles. So this would work in space as well. But again, it's using similar principles. Okay, this one is principally for working in space. The JF King device, where it's ionizing the air, producing the charged particles, and then you phase these corona rings to do pitch and yaw and give your vectoring. So this is a very, very, very simplified look at really kind of how this would be working in a much more complicated way. But they've divided these up so you can have both phasing up and phasing down potentially simultaneously. And so you have tight control on whether you're vectoring up, vectoring down, or tilting. Yeah, so I think we're going to be able to make a device that looks a little bit like this. But you know what? I'd really like it to be run steampunked. It would be great if the whole device was just run steampunked. But probably we're going to need to have a homopolar generator in there, and we're going to need to have a high voltage device, and we're going to need to probably have, unfortunately, because there's not many good ways to do it otherwise, a magnetic a mercury contact based system, because it can carry the very high currents that are produced by a homopolar generator. But anyway, there's something more interesting that I will come on to at another time that's going on with a homopolar generator. So there's no homopolar generator in here, but there is in this pattern, and there is in this pattern. Curious. And the homopolar generator is very good at generating very, very high currents at low voltage, which is the direct opposite of a Tesla coil, which is creating extremely high voltages and very low currents. Okay, but that is not what I'm interested in. And I will talk about what I'm referring to when I go on to do a more detailed explanation of how something like this might work using the understanding we already have now. And that is It's to do with what happens when you're spinning the metal, not the current part, but other things that are going on. And it starts to make sense why other things are in the device in the place that they are. Anyway, that's for another day. It's been a real pleasure. It is now 1:20 in the morning. I need to get to bed because I've got a lot of work to do before going to Strasbourg, which I will be in this time next week, having attended the reception. And I need to do my presentation for that, which I think is going to be extremely critical because there was something else I was going to share tonight, but I'm going to share it at Strasbourg. The paper with Binger and Huang is literally a watershed, and it's really going to change a lot in my view. But I think we can have power systems for producing heat predominantly, and I think it will break the back of disbelief that's going on in the West. So I think we're really at the new dawn of an old age, and we have been, you and I, and the other members of the MFMP, and all of those scientists, both present and long since past, we are lighting the new fire together. So with that, I will say, thank you very much. Buenas noches, dobranoc. Good night.